Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. In this special episode, I'll be chatting with Jeremy Rossi and John Bellone. Jeremy is the Global CIO for Intelligent Automation and Analytics at SS&C, and John is the Global CIO for the Global Investor and Distribution Solutions, otherwise known as GIDS, division at SS&C. So welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I'm glad you guys are here. So, Jeremy, start off, give us a little more of an introduction, because I just told your title. That doesn't tell you anything about anything. Let us know who you are, and then, John, follow up.
So I'm a technologist that happened to stumble into the hard problems of helping people get things done and people management. So joined SS&C about 4 months ago and responsible for driving technology support and product forward. But what I am is a guy that loves making technology.
Well, Jeremy stole my introduction. So I've been at SS&C now for 7 years. Held a bunch of different hats, but for about the last let's say 5 months or so, I've been leading the team here at GIDS. We're responsible for a lot of transfer agency activities in the US and the UK and APAC. I would echo a lot of what Jeremy said, but most of my life been spending behind the keyboard writing software, but a big portion of my career for the last 10 years or so has been leading large technology teams, specifically, around infrastructure and change in delivering technology and solutions faster to customers.
Gotcha. So obviously, both of you guys are seriously dyed-in-the-wool technologists. So as we see all of the changes in technology, specifically with a lot of the Gen AI stuff that's been rolling out, but even more so, just a couple of days ago, Microsoft introduced their first
Quantum
based
chip
on quantum. Yes. And
I got opinions about that.
I bet you do. So that's been 20 years in the making from them. So who knows what other kind of magic they have behind the scenes here. But tell us what you think as we see all these new technologies come out. How do any financial services companies, any companies in general, how can they absorb all this stuff?
I'm going to let John go because I'll give my take and how to violently disagree.
I was going to say my hot take is it says that the quantum chip's going to make quantum computers in the hands of people years sooner. We're years away from having it on your desktop versus decades. The same thing with fusion.
Yeah. And don't forget about fully autonomous cars.
Yeah. I think the idea of a quantum chip is a lot of marketing around it, right? There's been a lot of media about how science fiction type things, they are real, they exist. I think the problem sets that they need to solve aren't necessarily that well thought out yet. There are things that would be great if you had a quantum chip that could solve them. Most of them, would destroy our security apparatuses that we have.
We're already working on that. We're fixing that.
We're working on it. But I think like the types of problems that we would want to solve are definitely a different class of problems that most people are used to. So it's not like you're going to be playing the next video game with a quantum chip and your FPS is going to go up 10,000%. Like that. It's not those kind of things.
So the article published in Nature, the chip and the publications and everything that's happened don't line up. The publication they published in Nature was written a year ago by their own admission, shows that they haven't proven it back then. And now they say they have, and they're releasing a chip. It's marketing, in my opinion, at this point. I think it has a long way to go, particularly topological quantum dots or whatever they're calling them. But I hope it happens. I hope they're correct. I hope they really are able to deliver some value. But the fact that they're moving it forward is the interesting part. The fact that a private industry is moving it forward is the part that I found more surprising. Not that I think that they've been the most successful, but that I really can't gauge it. I need a quantum physicist to do
They are
that.
funded by DARPA for that particular project. So I'm guessing that there's a little more government
Oh,
cash
I didn't know that.
around there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be nice if we actually got some, money from that, but
It's amazing. A trillion-dollar company gets lots of DARPA funding to go have fun.
Exactly. Well, they've been doing that 20 years. I can imagine how much money has been put in that black hole. But as we look at this, so you talk about, the fact that some of this technology, as whiz bang as it might be, is still years away from actual practical application.
Well, let's also talk about like quantum computing qubits has like John was saying, awesome capabilities to deliver value for particular use cases. The best way I've ever heard it described is you have a topological map with an entire mountain range of the Colorado Rockies, and you need to find a single point. That's really hard. That's vertically, horizontally, 3-axis. That's a lot, really thing. The value that quantum computers are going to do very quickly, particularly D-Wave, which is already in production, is imagine filling it to water, the topograph with water to exactly the right level where the answer is. So you no longer have to search all of the problem space. You reduce that problem space to just where the water meets the edge of the land. And that reduction in problem space is massively useful. It's going to be impactful. It's going to change how we do computing, but it is not going to solve all of the problems. It's not going to take our problems and say like, oh, we have AGI instantly because we can just process all the information. It doesn't change the things. It just makes certain problems very easy. Yeah, but it's going to be fun no matter what.
I definitely, I do think that one of the limiting, factors would be the algorithms and the types of problems that you're going to approach solving with a quantum computer. This will help that, of course, depending on the cost of the processor. It's not like it's going to come out and I'm going to go get it at Micro Center, right? That was the one thing that was not, starting at $50,000. It wasn't something that they mentioned. So I'm sure that this is still going to be, quite something that you're only going to see in research universities or large companies. And with 8 qubits, I think it was 8.
32? 8? 30? I don't remember.
I think this chip was 8, but I might be wrong.
Well, considering that each one of these chips they create, I don't know how many are actually in existence. They had to manually layer the atoms one by one. That tells you something that we're talking about mass production anytime soon on these things. So certainly
that's pretty cool in and of itself, though. You got to admit.
It is. But let's take all that together. So we're layering atoms to create better or different kind of matter states to compute in a quantum world. I mean, does that sound like a Star Trek kind of episode title or what?
So we've been doing that for 20 years. So we've been like IBM made the smallest movie in like the smallest full form movie with individual atoms like 15, 20 years ago. It's like the research is there. The part is, when does it hit
the application,
general consumption? When is it in our data centers? That's the part that it really gets crazy fun.
The one thing most things what quantum computers is chips done. I don't think it's any different. It requires massive amounts of cooling. I'm curious. I did not see. There's a video, kind of marketing video. I didn't watch that part, but I read the article. I'm definitely curious to see what are the types of cooling requirements for this thing, because most quantum computers, they're in a building, right? It's not.
Yes.
It's not like it's
colder than space.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. You're getting to that almost absolute zero to make sure that everything is working properly and they have less errors than they do the actual data. So regardless of all this, we'll step away from quantum, because obviously that one is truly a black hole into itself. And let's go into let's take a look maybe at the AI space, because that also is changing quite rapidly. And part of that rapid change is something that we've seen in our business units having to grapple with on a daily basis as we see the transitions change. I mean, literally every couple of days we have new models that are coming out, and this one is benchmarked better than the next, and better than the next, and better than the next. How do organizations grapple or hold on to that to say, I'm going to select this model, or I believe this is the one? Is it Right now, is it like a red
Don't
on
just
red
don't
kind
do
of
that.
thing?
Don't do that. It's not going to be a select this model. It's how do you build, as with all technology, how do you build a system, service, a machine to onboard these in effective ways and using the correct governance to control them effectively? Well, it's not a select and go forward. This isn't like an AES 256 standard or some hash that we're going to go say stamp as a standard. This is going to be how do we as an organization onboard these effectively in a controlled manner in a way that we know how they're being used and how they're being trusted. It's governance, like all enterprise software. How do you govern them? How do you do it right? And then once you do it a couple times, it should just get better and better and consume that value increasing that LLMs are giving us by being more efficient over time. You should just be able to take advantage of that. I'm excited for when LLMs become only part of the equation. And we have to do that next conversation of what's the great thing in AI besides LLMs, because I don't think they're the end all be all. And that's what I'm excited for, because I think there's so much research going into the general AI bucket right now. I'm looking for something that's going to come from the side that's going to really be different.
John, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I lean definitely more towards looking towards the what's going to be next, and how are you going to use it to solve real problems. And I say real problems, I mean, rather than just chatting and asking questions of it. We're starting to see doing more models that are more capable of like deeper reasoning and reasoning that are extends like the one-shot capabilities of a prompt. It's quite amazing. In fact, I tested the new, I think it's the O1 mini model for ChatGPT, O3 mini model for ChatGPT a few days ago. And one of the things that I told it is I said, listen, one shot prompt, create me a rendering of a car with an OpenGL renderer written in Rust. And the model needed to know, first of all, what's an OpenGL renderer? What is the Rust programming language? I didn't give it any of those prompts, but then it encoded wheels that it would render with the renderer, like for, a car that knows what a car is, but need to know like logically how to actually do that in the code. And then kind of moving forward, I told it to create me frames of pixel art for like an actual like animation, and it was able to do that as well. So again, these are all things based on prompts that are one-shot prompts, didn't do any type of pre-training or anything fancy here, and building tools around these prompts is really where I see that the leaps that we're gonna be doing now, with just the ability to typically what we had human in the loop doing these kind of analysis. Now, if your accuracy for some programs required you to kick out kind of something that was a high probability of knowing if data was correct, or if a record is correct, or if some type of input was correct, you can now reasonably rely on a model, and then you're using less people to do those kind of things. I said reasonably. I didn't say absolutely.
I'm going to use the analogy. Who commits the code is the person responsible when you're doing coding with AI. And I think that's going to stay the way even with these. And I think it's augmentation of experts. It's its best possible use case. It's when you're augmenting, when you have no concept of the topic and you ask it to do something, it feels like magic. It feels special, and like but it's probably going to be wrong in ways you don't know.
That's absolutely true. It's true with a lot of things, in computing that have kind of gone leaps over the years, right? Like the first time that we started to see these things, certain things come out in the computing market, right? Like smartphones. Like normal people weren't using smartphones, right? In like 2005. It took advancements in interface. It took advancements in technology for people to be able to use them. But the idea of a smartphone existed long before, years before the iPhone came out, right? And it required people to use them first, to understand it, to improve upon it, before you started seeing people that weren't experts using them. AI in particular, it's an interesting thing. I don't look at it as much as a computing advancement, as more of, Jeremy, to your point, like an aid to experts.
Yeah, I'm going to build on what you're saying is people who say like GPS is an aid to me navigating, and I've outsourced that because it's gotten so good. But I haven't outsourced my driving yet because it hasn't gotten good enough. And we have to talk about how do we get to that kind of level and trust. And it takes time and it takes faith and it takes, well, not faith, it takes engineering, it takes proof, and it takes a large number of people doing it to show it's valuable. Yeah, it's an interesting world with AI. I've been trying to, well, that's my own personal argument, and I'm going to lose this one. We should be talking about this as LLMs are doing a lot right now. AIs, this is one branch of AI,
Yes.
but there's a lot more we can be doing, and we need to be exploring it. LLMs are awesome. They have a wow factor that is bar none of any of the other AI technologies I've seen because they feel like magic when you use them.
So what I like to use, kind of close on this, and we're talking along with this
Oh,
stuff.
we'll talk forever. So like,
what I
we've
like
been
to
doing
use
this
is,
for a while.
Jeremy and I and Michael, we're old enough here to remember what encyclopedias were, and the Britannica, and having a rack or a shelf of those in your house, right? I also remember when Microsoft Encarta was released and came on a CD, and everyone was like, "Wait a second, this CD is that whole shelf?" And then it was Google in the late 90s, right? And that's when the normal person was like, wait a second, I just type in this box and it gives me magic, right? And I think, we're definitely at like the Encarta point.
Maybe. Um, I wish I could have a little side bet on that.
Do you don't think we're as far as Encarta yet?
No, I actually think it is, but I think that the progression from Encarta to the internet or Encarta to Wikipedia is a fundamentally different thing than what we're talking about. I don't know that we've reached Encarta moment because what I'm wondering is when are we going to see it not as chat and human interfaces, but augmentation to more systems. So I'll give the example I always give is we have to start changing our systems to take advantage of these by inverting the order of operation to make them more useful. So an AI right now, it's really easy or LLM, it's really easy to add where it verifies your documents after you put your name, you put your address, and then it goes like you upload your tax forms and it verifies that that's the wrong way to do it. You should upload your documents first so that the AI can sit there and put all your fields for you and you verify it. Now we're getting that learning loop. We're feeding back. We're improving the system, but we're getting the advantage ourselves. So those are the parts that I'm more interested in right now in the AI space is what should we be doing to make these things better, to make our lives better, not just to slap on another chatbot, not to put another copilot on things, but to make it so that, it's really easy to use the government website, or it's really easy to use my local state website because we did things in the right order. We're applying the technology in the best way possible, not just to say we did it, but to achieve a better outcome.
Using kind of Jeremy's example in the analogy that I gave, it's going from like paper returns to TurboTax, or first to an accountant and then going to TurboTax. And then the next step from like TurboTax is like, here's my pile of papers and documents, just throwing them to the computer and saying, great, now I don't got to worry about it. Send me the report when you're done.
People are trying to do that. I've seen that happen.
So bringing it around back, stay on the LLM for just another moment. You mentioned something, Jeremy, about governance and the fact that you're not going to choose an LLM. Do you foresee, I imagine the answer is yes, but do you foresee either a layered approach or a multi-LLM approach based on the specific training that those LLMs have, and have those applied in a way that perhaps can help direct some of that stuff towards the inversion that you mentioned, where the data goes in and those LLMs are then interconnected that way?
I'm going to say the answer has changed in 3 months that I would give to this question that will actually tell you more about the answer than the question itself. It's the models by which you can bring like the technology and way you bring those available to your other technology resources is the part that you want to do. You don't want to have, you want an abstraction between you and your model so you can use the best one. You can change them out as necessary. You can find the most efficient, and then you can use the one that's the most cost effective for the use case. I'll give an example is with our governance model. Most of the time, Llama 3.1 meets expectations for the early use cases. You don't need to use 70 billion parameter Llama L1, 3.1 will get to there. Don't use more if you don't need it. It's a simple use case. Don't pay the extra money, the cost, the tokens, whatever you need. So, but as those get cheaper and it becomes easier to run, you can switch to, well, not a DeepSeek, but like a Quinn 44 billion prompt. These things are amazing. Use it. It can answer the questions the same way, same governance model, migrate to it. You need to be dynamic and be able to use the right one for the right job on time. Now, 3 months ago, I would have said there's going to be an advantage for SLMs, small language models, where they can ask, take a question and then turn it into whether I need to go get a big, expensive language model. I no longer believe that's a necessary step. The price per token has dramatically fallen so fast, so quickly, that those are not competitive anymore. You should be using the more commoditized things and watching the advancements play throughout the entire market. I talked about this with DeepSeek in one of like a little LinkedIn post. Is DeepSeek shows us there's a lot more efficiency to be done for really easy use cases that people are starting to take advantage of on top of the existing models. So you need to be dynamic. You need to be able to do the right thing using your technology that routes to it. And you got to be open to trying out new ones. Now, you also hinted at something, Michael, in your statement that I think you're trying to get to, which is my most dreaded term is agentic.
I didn't want to say it because I know you dreaded it. That's why
No.
I sent it. How do you say it without saying it?
You said it, models talking to models. It's not that I don't think it's the end destination. It's not that I don't think it's the right thing. But it's like fully self-driving cars. Let's talk about what steps it's going to take us to get there. We put levels for self-driving cars where we have cars at 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 until they get to fully self-driving. Because then we can talk about what we can use them for now, not 3 years from now. We still don't have full self-driving cars. We're not going to have full agentic for a long time either. So how do we take advantage of models talking to models or models talking to services, talking to API, talking to robots, talking to people in a cohesive way that we can get to outcomes? And that's the part I'm more interested in instead of talking about the agentic future that will come at some point in time.
And I think you brought up a good point because even with self-driving cars, I would say that the majority of the people who drive are probably pretty happy with just the cruise control as it is. And maybe they get really excited when they got adaptive cruise control, right? And then that's, okay, this is great. That next step, though, as you mentioned, takes a lot more to it, when in fact, the majority of the folks probably get by with adaptive cruise control. Is that kind of like the idea you're looking at?
Yeah, well, it's not only the idea, it's just setting expectations. So like, that's the part I want to get to is like, when nobody walks around going, my Tesla's going to be fully self-driving anymore and saying that's the goal. We all have a little more reasonable expectations so that be fine. That means they're happier. That means whether that's what they want, but it feels like, oh, I know what I'm getting. And I that's what I want. And I want that in the short term.
That makes sense.
Don, you were trying to say something, but as always, I'm talking over you.
Well, I actually think that the kind of how we rate autonomous vehicles is a great way to approach agentic as well. I hate the word, but the point is true. Multi-model, I don't think it's a question of if we are doing it's happening now, right? Like there are vision models or audio models or language models, right? And then having having some type of control model or something. Right now that's an LLM. They do it in different ways depending on, what we're talking about here. But over time, yeah, I definitely see your interface, your how you speak to the agent, maybe changing voice, text, visual, and then it deciding for you, choosing the best model based on your costs, based on like what your thresholds are for for errors. Sometimes it doesn't matter if there's that big of an error. It's not life or death. It's not a legal contract. Like you just need to have a general guess at something. But I do think that one of the big things, DeepSeek was interesting because it did show that there were optimizations, and I think everyone knew that there were optimizations, but they were chasing the They're chasing the bigger parameters and more, better benchmarks on this thing on the benchmark we created ourselves, right? Dumb, use it and continue to use it with the same inputs and observe the outputs. That's the only way you're going to really realistically see how much better it's getting. And yeah, I think with ChatGPT, the beauty of it and the what really took off is when they were able to show how easy it was to interact with, build things on top of it, rather than just looking at the model itself. Because the models now, they're good enough for what a lot of people need them for, and that's just basic reasoning purposes. That's, if you're using ChatGPT as a self, you're using it for basic reasoning right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So you brought up something that you talk about. Well, if it's only this, then you're probably okay with it's doing it because this is not a life and death decision. So if you're talking about introducing the concept of risk, how do you evaluate the outputs from AI?
So why don't we talk about software development real quick?
All right.
So Microsoft, for a long time, and I say Microsoft, I mean GitHub, has had GitHub Copilot. One of the things they don't tell you about, and they did a little bit, is who owns the code that the model produces, right? And the interesting thing is that you don't, because no one does at this point, because there hasn't been a large, at least that I'm aware of, test in the courts regarding ownership over LLM produced output. And the same is really true for any type of algorithmically generated code based on some IDL. So if we're talking protobuf, or we're talking a schema and then producing code from that, you as an organization, as a person, as a company, don't own the code that's produced. So you need to be very careful. We're back to the governance about how you use these models and how much those models are actually, just like the GPL, infecting your code base. And for a lot of things, for things that aren't, let's call it crown jewels, websites, maybe things that are just like reports and dashboards, that's fine. That doesn't matter. But for things that actually are your secret sauce, let's say Wolfram Alpha, or if you're trading, or if you're a company like us and we have calculation engines, things that are very proprietary and worth a lot of money, you don't necessarily want that ambiguity in IP ownership right now.
And to navigate that, I want my teams to use as many tools as I can to get them as performant as possible. And this question comes up all the time: is what can we do? And I go right, make your unit tests. And is it the greatest unit test writer? No. But if I make the part that the developer doesn't take the most enjoyment in easier, and get him working on the more valuable stuff with the part that it's intellectually perfect. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't infer things. You can't understand some of the code underneath by these unit tests, but that's the scale part. That's the part we have to pay attention to. So I sit here and talk about, hey, AI needs to be governed. While at the same point in time, I'm doing the same thing with my teams. Is how do I get them to use the tools, but governing it well, but trying to get them as performant and fast as possible, pushing them further and further to having tools help them get the best code out.
How can you tell when something is quote unquote too risky to provide to, or you run through an LLM? What's that kind of threshold?
I'll let John go first because I have a different threshold than other.
For when to use it?
What becomes a risky use, and how do you identify that kind of?
So, I mean,
threshold?
the first thing that's risky is whenever you're dealing with a regulator. So, anything that's a regulated business entity or a regulated product. So when you're talking about financial advice or healthcare outcomes, you definitely need a professional that understands those regulations a lot of times to make a decision, or at least to advise a party on a decision. And that's actually, an interesting approach, because a lot of those things, let me step back. When you're talking about advising someone on their portfolio, or advising someone on maybe a fund structure inside of a retirement plan, those things often are self-directed, right? Those are things that you can generally, for the most providers, through our tools that we provide in GIDS to our customers, you can do that yourself. But as soon as you start suggesting and directing, there's that fine line of are you actually advising at that point? So you need to be very careful when you introduce those tools. And you also need to inform the user about that this was an AI tool that made the decision, and understand that it's not 100% accurate, and they're not a professional, and there's not a human behind the suggestion.
I'm going to answer that in a very specific way. The AI doesn't make the decision. It should advise somebody to make the decision.
Yes.
And that person has to be an expert in what the AI is advising.
So they can understand whether or not that
I don't know
is
about that part.
Real answer?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be the end all be all. It doesn't have to be the best expert. But if I take somebody from a finance background and then have AI write them code in C++ and have them evaluate it, they are not going to be able to tell you if the AI is doing a good job, bad job, or putting them at risk. If I invert that and they sit there and say, like, I take a financial advisor and I have the LLM generate a financial portfolio and advice, and he reads it and does a good job of it, doesn't trust it, uses it as a feedback loop, that is a good methodology. It's a great advisor to experts. I'm going to take it's been rolling around the internet. I love it. It's from the 70s. Somebody had a piece of paper at IBM that said, a computer cannot make a management decision because it cannot be held accountable. And I still think that is an axiom that I want to try to follow through. I don't think it's going to last forever. When that piece of paper gets crumpled up in my mind because we have started having management decisions made by LLMs, I'm going to have a different story. But it might come, but I just don't think it's going to be soon. I think that accountability is the cornerstone of how big services and companies get done. Doesn't mean that it won't make small decisions, but accountable decisions are going to be tough.
I do think you, and we see it now, you'll start to see the introductions of AI assist to the end user. All right. You're seeing it now with Copilot and a variety of applications. It's an assistant to the person that's actually doing the action. The difference now is when, what Jeremy just mentioned, is having the expert on the other side advising, and then another person assisting that expert, right? And then I think the next step, not the next step, but the final step is there's no expert, and the model's so good that it does it itself. Now, I don't like that at all.
I'm not convinced that's going to happen.
That's very Skynet to me. But listen, I mean, that is what self-driving cars are, right?
No, I'm going to let me give you my what I use.
Wait, no, answer that question, yes or no? Because you don't think that's what a self-driving car is? Like, no, autonomous level 3?
Autonomous level 5 with everybody driving somewhere. 5 is but the key factor is there's no more humans. Yeah. When there's no more humans in the loop at all, it's not a decision making. I don't trust my car to drive without me at the wheel paying attention. I don't trust other people's cars without paying attention. I pay deep attention. I'm not handing my things over. I deeply worry about that transition state, because that's what the other conversation I have about it's the 50-50 world where we're not in the trust state, but we're not there, and some people are and some people aren't.
That's like level 4, level 3.
That's my concern. That's my concern.
Let me push on that one a little bit. Okay, so taking it from a consumer perspective and a generational perspective. So as you mentioned before, we're all middle age, just leave it at that. And because of that, and especially because we've been in tech for so long, we are generally wary, right? That's our first thought, is we're wary about new tech, and we kind of look into it, right? We're excited about it, but the idea is we're going to hold it at arm's length as we play with it. Versus maybe if you look from a consumer perspective, especially a Gen Z consumer, they may approach this in a very different way, and ascribe a lot more trust to it than perhaps Jeremy or John would in their first iteration or usage of a particular technology. So given that, do you see that the consumerization or the consumer aspects might end up pushing organizations to adopt things more quickly than perhaps they'd like to?
Almost,
for example, let's take it this way. Instead of me going to a financial advisor who has 25 years of real world experience through all the markets and the emotions that go along with it, I go to a quote unquote robo advisor. I use whatever, an LLM magic behind a button somewhere. I don't know any better. And I put my stuff in there. And like you said before, I'm not really sure. It sounds okay. It sounds like a right thing to do. It's probably based on some knowledge somewhere. And I'm just going to do that because it's a lot cheaper for me to do it that way. And I'm a consumer. Do you see that pushing its way in and pushing organizations to adopt that in a more rapid way than they perhaps want to?
I'm going to answer this. I don't think that's the driver. I don't think
Okay.
it's consumers.
Okay.
I think it's efficiency. And I think there is. So I'm going to pause and tell you a side story for a second. I'm responsible for an automation product, Blue Prism. And whenever I talk to a large number of CTOs, they're talking about agentic. They want to know about what's happening in 5 years. And then I talk to people using our product, and they say, if you put another chatbot in front of me, I'm gonna stab you. The problem we're having is that we don't have it figured out yet of how to make these useful for the people that they need to get the drive going in the enterprise and in product space. And that's very different than consumer. And I think that in the consumer space, it's going to be about ease of use. It's going to make them you are going to be able to drive people into more sophisticated, useful product services, programs, because it doesn't have a barrier to entry, because the way to get there is so much simpler. So I don't think it's going to be because the generational, I don't think it's going to be because they just are accepting. I think it's just going to be, it's going to increase the exposure to them. They're going to get to those systems more coherently and easier. On the other side, the efficient, like big business and enterprises, it's about efficiency. It's about how do we make choices faster, better, because that's a competitive advantage. And we have to pay attention to that.
I'm going to unpack it a few different ways. So you kind of said with you're referring to like putting things in a robo advisor, and I mean people use Reddit to make stock advice now, right? So there's definitely like a level
There's
of
humans behind that, though.
there's definitely like a threshold of like, or a scale of who wants to accept different types of risk, right? So that's part of this here, is that my level of risk, because my situation is entirely different than Jeremy's and yours, is so understanding what I'm willing to take a bet on versus, this is like, it's gambling 101, right? But when we're talking about let's change the topic about healthcare instead, about, saving someone's life with like a surgery bot, right? That's different, right? Because most people there want the same outcome. So in that situation, I don't care who you are. I think that someone, if you say, hey, listen, there's this robot here with a little claws that snip snip that's going to like take your appendix out. And then there's this person here that's a 25-year veteran, and here's their track record. Which one do you want? I'm pretty sure that most people are going to go to the 25-year veteran with the track record.
That's probably true.
So can we play with this conversation a little bit, Michael? Because I think we're missing something, which is when you use these AI, here's my favorite thing to do with LLMs. I love arguing with them. They are an opinionated person to pressure test my own ideas incessantly. And I'll tell you, 99.9% of the arguments aren't that useful. But sometimes the doozies come from me trying to prove it wrong. And the forcing function of having a debater that's willing to talk to me and all the time is unbelievable. So what I started doing is I have my son try to do this. I go, they're like, you can't use any AI for school. And I go, no, you can, as long as you don't ask the AI to do your work. You can argue with it. You can tell it that it's wrong. You can have it prove to you that if you're arguing with it to say, no, Columbus did not find North America. It was blah, blah, blah. Argue with it. Prove your point. And I will stand behind him at school and say, like, look, he wasn't using a tool just to get an answer. He was using a tool to make himself better. And so like when I look at these things, it's trust, or do we use them to make ourselves better? Back to the GPS. I outsourced my GPS, my navigation brain to them because it was just better and I don't need that knowledge. But when it comes to my knowledge of understanding the world, I'm not going to hand it over. I'm going to make myself better by using these technologies. And that's what I think we should be focusing on with how to use these tools and how to get the most out of them.
That makes sense, especially as you look towards, I mean, you bring up education. And this is something that we've covered on our podcast a number of different times with other folks. Looking from a child's perspective, this is all magic, right? And it's very interesting, given the fact that you have a specific skill set that many parents don't have, and you can guide your child through this. How are you guiding your child in terms of, you mentioned, learning at school, whatever. How are you guiding them towards their, like, a marketability, I guess it is, for that next stage of life, whenever that is?
I'll let John go because I always answer.
My children are younger than Jeremy's, and it's a little different. I think for me, the way that I've started guiding my kids is by, again, using things to, like, games and some of the tools to show them how to use the technology to solve problems, right? So, like, I use YouTube a lot, like, rather than I'm a very visual person, so rather than an instruction manual, I sometimes I want to see how someone else did it, and it's very good to see, how did you install this, right, and see how they installed it, and then often you'll get answers to questions that the person that wrote the instruction manual didn't think about, right, and I showed my kids that a lot, like, watch a few videos about something before you try and necessarily decide not to do something, but it's always try it first yourself.
Mhm.
But when you don't know how to do something, watch some videos, do some, that's my equivalent of, like, Googling for them because they're young. Watch some videos about how to do it after you try it yourself, and then try it again. And then it's reinforcement, right? Like, keep looping back around and doing it. And kind of, my daughter plays a lot of Minecraft, and she's very creative, and showing her how to use cause and effect with Minecraft, especially some triggers and things. It's starting to get her to understand, like, okay, well, like, now I understand, like, that it's not simply like a colored block. These blocks are different, and when you use them in different ways, then you can build bigger and better things, and you start to see the gears turning. So I think using the tools, especially the tools that eventually that Minecraft would turn you into being more of, like, a software developer, starting using their curiosity and the want to be able to play a video game, but instead of just saying go play, like, something where you're just mindlessly poking at a screen, like, use it to actually teach.
I'm going to say the same thing, but in a fundamentally different way. Is if the person uses it to be lazy, they're going to get exactly what they put into it. And this goes for anything in life. It's the general thing I'm trying to teach my kids, and I'm failing in many ways. I'm succeeding in many ways. Is where you spend. John will laugh at this. Where you spend your time shows what matters to you. My son had to write that 1,000 times because he was cheating. He got in trouble. Because it does that's what matters, is where do you put your time and what do you expect out of it? And if and that goes for all ages. That goes for any. And so the more you're willing to put into it, the more you'll get out of it, and the better off it will be. That would be technology. That would be racing a car. That would be riding horses. That would be going in the woods. If that's where you put your time, that's where you care and what you do. That's awesome. But you're going to get more out of those things the more time you put in it.
What you should have done, Jeremy, is use Fodado to do handwriting analysis, and when he messes up, tell him that one didn't count.
I didn't need to. The photos allowed me to find that out anyway, because his friends photoshopped it in the new numbers for him on the side of the channel. And they did a pretty good job, except for I just literally just go like, this page, these writings are exactly the same on the four corners of the page. And God darn it. Yeah. So there's a fun story there.
Interesting. So, kind of wrapping this part up, do you see these technologies, specifically the LLMs and the AI that you're helping your children learn, Do you see this as a leveling of the playing field for
No.
the global environment?
Not even close.
And
Can
why
you
is that?
kind of, before we say that, can you just give us an example of what you meant there?
For example, folks in fill in the blank third world country who may have access to a computer has the same access to ChatGPT that your child does.
Mhm.
So does that level the playing field, or is
No.
there more to it?
There's a lot more to it. I think, I think, again, using GPS as the example, giving someone GPS, it just makes them, faster at one particular thing. Obviously, large language model makes you faster at like knowledge lookup or asking questions and getting them answered. But ultimately, like, you still need to do it, the things yourself. And the value here is knowing how to ask it, what to do, and then what to do with the information. And I'm not saying that it won't eventually give them a more level playing field, but there's so much other things socioeconomically that uh, go into just the two different environments and global regions between a third world country and a first world country that doesn't. But it will make quality of life better over time.
Maybe. I'm way less optimistic than you. It's going to come down to time and available time to use the tools to learn. There is the amount of it in. If you're hungry, it doesn't matter what you learn. It doesn't matter how much access you have. You are fundamentally going to be at a disadvantage. I don't think it's a great leveler. I think it is going to allow a certain percentage of the population that take advantage of it to exceed far quickly utilizing these tools. It will create further of a divide. I think that the people that master these tools will be, I'm going to use the old programmer saying, because I think it is going to be apt over time, is there going to be 10x programmers? And we're going to need less programmers. And that will result in a fundamental shift in how we hire and how we do things. So I think on the global stage, these are going to push things into a more lopsided direction, because the people that have time to study, use, and make the most advantage of it will reap most of the rewards. It doesn't mean that exceptions won't be found. It won't mean that somebody in some country isn't going to use these tools to disprove me. I'm going to say the majority will be at a net. It will be a net benefit to the people with the most time.
I was looking at the question from a different angle. I was looking at it from, would there be a net positive benefit to said person's life by AI? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Because tools, medical therapies, drugs, potentially, like all that, will make society globally better, right? But yeah, to Jeremy's point, this isn't going to, it's going to be similar like cell phones, right? I would say, like, yeah, giving you a cell phone gives you much more mobility and the ability to answer, to be able to be now involved in a global economy, right? But does it make it so that you're going to be, more educated than someone in a first world country? And the answer is no, but it does give you a better chance.
Sounds like there's a context in all of this. You take the context of a third world country where perhaps the children there are subsistence farming with their parents, and that's the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're never going to get past that first level because, as you're right, they're hungry and they're looking for shelter. And so that they're never going to, whether it's freely available to them or not, it doesn't really make a difference. But I can also argue the other context is even in first world countries where parents are either ignorant or have chosen to help their children see that football is the right path for their life, or soccer is the right path for their life, or swimming is the right path for their life. Again, nothing wrong with any of those things, quite honestly, but the context in which they live then becomes shaped around what their parents have provided to them or for them, which may become a true interest or not. And that context may not give them any time either. Just like the folks in the third world country who don't have time because they're worried about eating, that people in the first world time, they don't have any time because they have been brought into a different kind of context where the learning is not necessarily prioritized over something else. So interesting conversation today, guys. I really appreciate you joining in and kind of giving us your 2 cents. This is a fun conversation.
I enjoy it. This is the fun stuff. I love talking like this.
It is a fun stuff. Well, we will definitely be doing this regularly. So if everybody hasn't already subscribed or not, please do so and get more from Transform Now with Jeremy and John in the future. Thanks for everybody, and we'll check you out in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.